On a clear and sunny Sunday afternoon, April 30th, 1978, third grader Christopher William Vigil, an energetic 9-year-old, went on a hike, as he often did, with his mother and younger brother, up Gray Rock Mountain Trail in Colorado. Gray Rock Mountain is located in the Poudre Canyon in Poudre Park, Colorado, off Highway 14. And while Chris and his family loved to explore the outdoors, they had never been to Gray Rock before. The 9-year-old, like most boys his age, ambitious and eager, ran ahead of his slower counterparts up the rocky hiking trail, eager to get to the top. His mother, Marianne Vigil, had his toddler brother, Eric Vigil, 4 years old, in tow and was struggling to keep the 4-year-old engaged enough to continue the hike. So she allowed Chris to run ahead. The mother reports that at some point the toddler, Eric, flat out refused to continue hiking, but she does not explain why she didn't insist upon looking for Christopher until 2 hours later. Marianne last saw Chris around 2:30 p.m., but didn't officially report him as missing to the police until 5:30 or 6 p.m. After almost a week of searching, and with upwards of 1,000 man-hours put into the search every day, rescuers and volunteers alike were low in morale and spirit. All in all, 170 rescue searchers combed the area for Christopher, along with 30 men on horseback and 3 helicopters. The entire community at this point had pitched in with kitchen workers preparing food for the rescue parties and organized and meticulous searches being enacted by both family members and strangers. Christopher's parents, Leroy and Marianne Vigil, say their son was knowledgeable about hiking and was well versed in trail safety. He was a straight-A student and an avid runner. He would run 2 miles after school on the track. He was also a strong swimmer and would swim laps. The first evening's weather, after gorgeous temperatures throughout the day, took an unfortunate and dismal turn with freezing temperatures of 30 degrees, with snow and fog hampering the search for Christopher, causing rescue personnel to doubt his survival for much longer if not found and taken out of the cold. The volunteer search party would begin at 4 a.m. and would search until dark, but to no avail. Police were very concerned as Christopher was dressed in light clothing, a green shirt, green plaid pants, blue tennis shoes, and a maroon jacket, and police feared he would not survive the night. Sustenance was also an issue, as the can of Diet Pepsi Chris walked away with was the only nutrition he had on him. Later, his mother would recall having had a recent talk with Christopher in regards to another girl who had gone missing on a trail and had survived because she had candy in her pocket. Based on recalling this conversation, Marianne believes Christopher may have also had candy in his pocket. While many townsfolk volunteered to assist in the search, the sheriff's department became frustrated with amateur hikers who felt they could venture into the unforgiving wilderness without a compass or even a topographical map. These inexperienced volunteers would sometimes come down with hypothermia from being improperly dressed, and others would leave because of the cold without informing the other members of the search party, leading to the search party believing that one of their own members had also gone missing and causing unnecessary stress and rigorous work for all involved. With the Colorado weather being highly variable and unpredictable, the clear Sunday that Chris had been missing was in existence no more. Fog and snow made a helicopter search impossible on May 1st, the morning after Chris went missing, but on May 3rd, the weather cleared and warmed, and a helicopter search was able to be implemented. However, it yielded no insight. At this point, investigators believed that, with the extreme weather, if Chris hadn't made it off the mountains yet, his chances of survival in the nighttime cold were slim to none. Rescue workers poured over between 15 and 20 square miles of land with altitudes as high as 8,000 feet. The rocky terrain was some of the most unforgiving in the Fort Collins area, and rescue workers feared for their own safety as well as Chris's. On day 5 of the search, with helicopters in use for the last 3 days, police tried an entirely new approach. They intentionally lost 3 youngsters around the same ages as Chris on the mountain. However, these youngsters were paired up with members of the sheriff's office the whole time. The 3 children, along with their 3 partners, were shown the trailhead where Marianne expected Chris to return, and then the pairs were dropped off in a meadow towards the top of a mountain by a helicopter and was told to find their way back. The sheriff's department were curious to see where the children, Chris's age, would go when they realized they were not on the trail. 2 of the 3 children followed the creek and skipped the trail entirely, sometimes walking directly over it in favor of following the water. The sheriff's department says that had they continued to do so, they would eventually have found their way off the mountain within hours. The other child went up the mountain in search of higher ground and became disoriented and misjudged the target of the home trail as being some 4 miles away from where it actually was. Based on insight gained from this experiment, rescue workers doubled down on the immediate area where Chris went missing, looking literally under every bush, rock, tree, or shrub. While searches were happening, police were imploring anyone who may have seen Chris that day and was willing to give insight on his movements on that fateful Sunday afternoon to come forward. As it was a weekend afternoon, the Vigils weren't the only ones on the trail soaking up the sun. There was Alan Chopin, a blonde man hiking alone on that Sunday, who said he saw Christopher on the trail. Christopher's mother, in an interview dated May 5th of that year, stated Alan told her that he had been sitting near the top of the mountain, eating lunch, when Chris came up and started talking to him. Chris was reportedly very social and would talk to anybody. Alan reportedly shared some food with Chris before offering to walk back to the trail with Christopher. Christopher refused, instead asking where a different unmarked trail would take him, to which Alan replied he did not know. Chris ran off, and that was the last time Alan saw him. Alan continued up the trail and about 5 minutes later hiked past Carol and Rebecca. At this point, all 4 hikers are meandering their way up the mountain. Carol and Rebecca, who were also hiking at the time of Christopher's disappearance, later told investigators that they spotted Chris walking ahead of them on the trail after he had spoken to Alan and after he had explored what Alan recalled him referencing as the drainage. So investigators knew that he made it out of the drainage area that he had told Alan he wanted to explore. Christopher, spotting the girls, asked them, "Did you see where the man went?" To which Carol pointed up the trail. Chris then asked, "Are you going up the rocks?" They answered, "Yes, if we ever make it," and Chris went on. They assumed that Alan was Chris's father, based on the closeness and time that both Alan and Chris passed the women. While on their hike, Carol and Rebecca also saw an unknown man sitting on some rocks near Christopher. This man, they described, had dark hair and dark skin, wearing a straw cowboy hat with the camera hanging around his neck. This man did not match the description of the other witness that came forward, Alan Chopin, and has never been identified. The 2 women sat down on a log within the vicinity of the unidentified man, uphill of him, but not within sight of him. Shortly after they started eating, they heard a young boy's voice yelling in what seemed like distress. The woman also said they heard a man's voice. They presumed it was Chris arguing with Alan, who they thought was his dad, but they did not know for sure as Alan never spoke to them. After what seemed like a couple minutes of arguing, Chris started yelling for what Carol and Rebecca would describe as, quote, simply yelling just for yelling's sake. Based on this alarming turn, one of the women wanted to check on the situation, but out of an abundance of fear and caution for their own safety, they stayed put, and the yelling ceased almost as quickly as it had begun. When the women walked past that same area after eating and hearing the ruckus, they saw only a dropped Diet Pepsi can. Christopher had been drinking a Diet Pepsi as he ambled up the trail. Christopher, explains his family, was a consummate nature lover and would never have littered. Rebecca picked up the Diet Pepsi can and stored it in her backpack to throw away when she got back to the parking lot. It was never recovered. Later, when Alan hiked back down to the trail and was informed by Marianne that Christopher had not returned, Alan ran back up to the area where he had last seen Chris, where he then encountered Carol and Rebecca, who he asked for help. The woman told Alan they had not seen Chris since earlier, when Chris hiked past them up the mountain, which happened shortly after Alan saw him. They recalled that, quote, "We heard him yelling and another voice, and we thought it was you," to which Alan replied, "It was not me." They concluded it must have been the man with the straw hat and camera instead. The pair of women reassured Alan that there was still 90 minutes of daylight left, and the woman offered to help look for Chris as they made their way back down the mountain. Alan ran off, obviously worried for the well-being of the boy he had happened across earlier in the day. When the ladies returned to their car, they drove around for a bit, looking for Chris from inside their vehicle. When they circled back around to the parking lot, they saw a red fire truck and were relieved that they would be taking over the search from there. By this time it was around 5:30, and it had been over 3 hours since Chris had run ahead of Marianne and little Eric. When the women were pressed to recall what cars were in the parking lot, they could only recall 2, a white Volvo station wagon and a light green car. On Friday, almost 6 days after his disappearance, the search for Christopher was suspended indefinitely due to an anticipated 3 to 5 feet of snow coming in and continuing to do so for the foreseeable future. This case history brings up for Coloradans the more recent case of Jared Attadero, a 3-year-old toddler who also went missing in the exact same canyon as Christopher. In 1999, on Big South Trail, Jared was hiking with a group of family friends and his sister when he ran ahead and in between the slower walking group and the faster walking group and got lost along the way. 2 fishermen saw Jared by himself as he walked in between the 2 groups, but as they could hear the slower group approaching from the back, they assumed he was well taken care of, and he walked right past them. Before leaving the fishermen's side, Jared innocently asked them if the forest contained any bears. During the search, a park ranger filed a sighting report at Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado, a 9-hour drive from Poudre Canyon, after seeing Jared's photo on the news while eating dinner. The park ranger was certain he had seen the boy that day and stated that the boy kept trying to hold his hand. A man had been seen walking with the boy, but kept calling him something like Gerald. However, the park ranger thought nothing of it at the time. His statement fell on deaf ears. A friend of the family, Cindy, investigated the area where Jared had gone missing. She discovered a family living in a cabin in the woods who were acting suspiciously. They were painting their VW van a different color when they noticed her watching. One of them jumped into a truck and sped over to her, screaming at her to leave. She told a friend, who reported it to the sheriff, but it was ignored. Despite an extensive search, which utilized thousands of man-hours and resulted in a helicopter crash, Jared was never found. 4 years later, some of Jared's clothes were found at the top of a 550-foot vertical peak, just 150 feet from the trail where he had originally gone missing. Strangely, this peak had been torn apart piece by search dogs in the ensuing rescue attempt, and therefore investigators thought it strange that an area so thoroughly searched by both canine units and the sheriff's department would now contain such obvious and clear artifacts as the child's outfit and shoes, with the exception of the shirt, which was still missing. This find seemed at first to be evidence that Jared had been attacked and maybe dragged up a hill by a mountain lion, one of the original theories, even though there hadn't been any mountain lion sightings in the area. Bone fragments of part of a cranial bone and a small molar, which was consistent with a 3-year-old, was also found, although no concrete identification was made and no other skeletal fragments from any part of the body was found. But upon further examination, the clothing brought more questions than answers, as when Jared's clothes were examined, it was found his pants were inside out. Also strange was the lack of bite or drag marks on the clothing and an obvious lack of blood, a required component in mountain lion attacks. Also confusingly sinister was the state of the toddler's shoes. They looked brand new. Not like they'd been sitting outside in the unforgiving snow and sun of the Colorado mountains. Were these clothes placed here as a red herring, an attempt to throw investigators off the real trail? These strange clues point to a possible abduction and not a wilderness death. Jared's father, Alan, believes that this is the most logical hypothesis and vows to never stop looking for his son, who he believes is still alive. The year Chris went missing, there were multiple alleged sightings of him. In July of 1978, a boy who was deaf and unable to talk communicated that he had seen Chris selling newspapers on the street. By reading lips, the boy was able to infer that Chris was selling newspapers to win a trip to Disneyland. Pueblo police were sent to interview the boy, but with so little info and, from their perspective, a tenuous source, no official report was filed. But 2 weeks later, Don and Cindy Dooley, a vacationing couple from Des Moines, Iowa, were visiting Cheyenne, a town in Wyoming about 45 minutes from Fort Collins, Colorado. While there, they claimed they were approached by an intelligent, tan boy with long hair who told him he was selling newspapers, and if he sold the most, he would win a trip to Disneyland. This was the same story as the deaf boy in Pueblo, Colorado. This boy was also wearing a green shirt. Recall that Chris was seen in a green shirt when he went missing, and seemed dirty and sun-exposed. About 15 minutes later, the same couple spotted the same boy sitting with another boy his age. When the couple went to dinner, the wife spotted a missing persons flyer with Christopher's info. "Oh my God, that is the little boy we just seen selling papers," she yelled, clutching her husband's arm. Police were called, as well as the father of Chris, whose information was on the flyer. Mr. Vigil drove to Cheyenne, but found nothing. A few months later, in Wyoming in the month of September, a trucker, Glenn Modi, reported being approached by a boy matching the description of Chris, 4'8" and 60 pounds. Originally, Chris was reported missing as 4'8" and 74 pounds, but his tremulous ordeal could have caused him to lose weight. The boy asked the man for $1 and some food, but the man, suspicious, refused. The boy thanked him while looking rather nervous and walked back to what the trucker remembered as a turquoise or light green car. Recall Carol and Rebecca saw that same color car in the parking lot of Grey Rock Mountain. The next morning, the trucker drove into Cheyenne and saw the missing persons poster with Christopher's photo on it, and he immediately called state police. The Fort Collins police made the 45-minute drive to Cheyenne, where they interviewed the trucker. He claimed he was 100% sure the boy who had approached him was the same boy as on the missing flyer. Furthermore, he was so sure that he adamantly turned down ideas of receiving the $1,000 reward, as he just wanted to help this boy find his family. That same month, Mr. Claude Ryans reported seeing Christopher looking dirty and haggard walking down Temple Avenue in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is the state that borders Colorado. In 2012, Mary Ann gave the National Database for Missing and Exploited Children a lock of Christopher's first haircut as a baby for DNA analysis. In 2013, a person named Julie Ferrer of South Dakota called police and said she had information on a boy who went missing in 1978. She claimed she knew who had taken him and gave a specific name, although we're not naming him in this documentary at this point because there's absolutely no available evidence that connects the two, and internet vigilantes are a real issue in cases like these. Her statements are largely blacked out in the released police files. She could not be reached for comment. The families of these missing children continue to hold out hope for some answers before they leave this world. Jared's father hoped that his son is out there, somewhere, alive, and waiting to be found. Others, like Christopher's mother and relatives, actually hope the opposite. They believe that if the boys were alive, it would mean a considerable amount of trauma and pain, and they hope that the extended and prolonged trauma was not a part of their missing children's story. If you have any information on Christopher Vigil, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678.